Good morning, friends. Thanks so much for stopping by to help us to celebrate Arbor Day. I'm Mrs. Wileczek, and I help out with science in our school district. And with me today is Mr. Gene Kelly, who helps take care of our beautiful grounds. We are so excited that you are here today. And I was wondering, do you know what it is that we celebrate on Arbor Day? Speak up so I can hear you. I didn't hear that. Did you hear that?
I did hear it.
I didn't hear it. It's very windy. Could you say it one more time? That's right, we celebrate trees. Excellent. Now, before we get into trees, I want to circle back because the past couple weeks in science class has been so exciting. We've had so much to talk about. Last week, what is it that we celebrated? That's right, Earth Day. And as you know, Earth is not just one thing. It's made up of a whole bunch of different things, living and non-living, that interact with each other. From the smallest bacteria cell to the biggest blue whale, all of these things have some sort of impact on each other. Animals, the plants, the rocks, the soil, they all interact. Do you know what some of the things are that trees provide for us? I'll give you a few seconds to shout out some answers. That's great. A couple things I did hear. I heard shade, I heard shelter, food. Okay, and I think I also might have heard my favorite, which is the most important in my opinion, air. Or some of you might have even said oxygen. Yes, that is science magic. The process called photosynthesis. Have you heard that word before? I bet you have. You're gonna learn a ton about it when you get to 7th grade, but for right now, what you need to know is that photosynthesis is the science magic of how plants make their food. They can't get up and walk around and get their food like you and I can. They're stuck here all the time. So they have to make their own food. How do they do that? Well, these beautiful leaves will take the sunlight in and water from the roots and mix them together with carbon dioxide, which what you and I breathe out, and they'll turn it into a special sugar called glucose. And as a result, this is the best part. After going through all of that, they give off oxygen. Do you know who needs oxygen? We do. And that is why we have a relationship with them. It's a beautiful thing. So, as a result, we really do need to respect trees, and that's part of the reason why we celebrate Arbor Day. Mr. Kelly and his team take care of all of our grounds across our district, and we are very lucky because we do have beautiful grounds and we have many trees. I don't have a clue how many trees we have.
Very, very many.
So since Mr. Kelly's with us and he is our tree expert, I'm going to ask you a couple questions if that's okay.
Okay, yes.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about Arbor Day? Why do we celebrate it and what's the history of it?
I can. Well, it all started way back in the late 1800s by a man named Julius Morton. He lived in Nebraska, and at that point in time he lived on a prairie with his wife, and there weren't too many trees on a prairie. So one day he came up with an idea to plant trees at his house, and then through the grapevine, through neighbors, he decided that he was going to plant many trees. And then in 1872 there were 1 million trees planted in the state of Nebraska, and that started the whole Arbor Day celebration.
That's awesome, and we still celebrate it today.
We still celebrate. In fact, in 1920 there was 45 states at that time that planted trees and celebrated Arbor Day, and now the entire world celebrates Arbor Day.
And typically, is it always this time of year?
Typically it's the last Friday in April.
Awesome.
For most countries, yes.
That's so interesting. So we'll be doing this again. In fact, some of our friends that might be with us today might have seen us visit them when they were in kindergarten, that are now in 3rd or 2nd grade. So here's another question for you. What is this pretty tree that we have right here, and what are you going to do with it?
Well, this is called a coral maple tree. And today this is our tree that we decided to plant. We're in front of the high school. And it's a little windy out here, so some things are blowing around. And we're in front of the high school, and this tree here was one of my favorite trees. We have 4 others planted in the district. So I chose this tree because it is one of my favorites and it grows really well. As you see, it's a very showy tree. It has a lot of very cool characteristics. One is the shiny pointy maple leaves on it, and then the other is this tree has a red bark, if everybody could see that, right? And what the red bark, why it has red bark is the sap that is in the tree has a reddish tint, and it filters out into the bark. So when they're really young, like this tree is, you see a lot of red. Even when in the winter, when it loses its leaves, you'll see the red bark all winter long. Very cool idea. And what does sap do? Sap is like the blood in a human. It takes the water and everything and travels out to create that photosynthesis. So that's what that is. The bark is like your skin, and the sap in the tree is like your blood. So that's what that does. This tree here grows to be about 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide. So we're going to plant this shortly. And if anybody has any questions, please let us know. It's very windy.
It's getting very windy.
So people have always asked me, Mr. Kelly, what is the tallest tree in the world? And then I always say to them, well, I was lucky enough to go out to Northern California, and the sequoia redwoods are the tallest trees in the world, and there's several parks out there, national parks, that you could see these trees. In fact, the tallest one is 370 feet tall, which is the length of a football field plus 70 more feet.
Wow.
That's one of the tallest trees. You see my two kids in front of one of those sequoia redwoods. And then the other cool feature is one of those parks was called the chandelier tree, which is another sequoia redwood that is over 1,000 years old, and you can actually drive your car through that tree. And the reason why they live so long is those sequoia redwoods have a bark that could be up to 20 inches thick. As I was telling you, everybody, that this bark here is real thin. That's why the sap filters through it. The bark of a sequoia redwood is 20 inches thick, and nothing can really harm it. And that's why they live for thousands of years and grow very, very, very tall. A good reason why. There's other reasons, but that's the main reason. Trees in our district, Tom, if you want to pan out to that pin oak tree. That's one of our biggest trees here. That tree was planted as the high school was built back in the 50s. And that tree then, I'm saying, my good guess is over 80 years old and over 120 feet tall. It's a very, very pretty tree. We have many of them here in the district, almost as old as that one, but that's one of our showcases in the district. So that's the sequoia redwood, some larger pin oaks. This one grows to about 20 feet tall and 20 feet wide. So are we ready to plant that then?
Yeah,
are we ready?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that information with us. So, and we're here at the high school, so you have to keep in mind when you come and you get into 9th grade, you come into the entrance of the high school, this tree will be here. It's not going to be this tiny anymore. Hopefully it'll start to flourish and be bigger, but you can come and visit it and see the progress that it's made in the next 8 years or so.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, it'll still be here, we hope. Yes. So I'm going to plant this tree, and I'm going to show you guys how to plant a tree. Over my 26 years of working here in the district, I've planted many, 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 many trees, and so far so good with that. So what you do is typically dig a hole the size of the root ball or a little bigger, really, and then which is pre-dug for us already. And when you buy a tree from a nursery, they either come in burlap or a container. This is in burlap, and it keeps the roots all together, as you know, when you buy it, so it's easy for transportation. So I'm going to take this root ball in the tree and put it in the hole, and we'll go from there.
Okay, great.
Okay, here we go.
You need my help at all?
Oh, you know what? Let's do that first. Okay, here we go. So when you plant the tree, you typically want it to be even with the earth or just slightly above. Throughout my years, I've always done it even with the ground, even with the dirt. So it's in the ground, and you make sure it's straight, and then we'll put some of the topsoil back in there, and then some mulch, which I'll do soon. This tree also, it loves birds love living in this tree because of a lot of the branches. So I found this.
Oh.
I found this robin's nest. This is an older robin's nest in one of the trees, one of the coral maples on the other side of the high school. And I just love to see all the hard work a bird does to create a nest. It has the mud and it has all the branches, and they do everything with their beak.
It's amazing.
Very cool. That's a robin's nest there.
Awesome.
So, one other thing about trees is it's called the drip line. This tree right now, these branches are up about 2 feet wide, if you notice. And the roots are about 2 feet wide. Once a tree gets bigger, as it gets wider, the roots underneath get wider as well. So if a tree is 40 feet wide, the roots are naturally going to be close to 40 feet wide as well. So that's called the drip line. So if it's this wide out here, it's this wide under the ground. Okay?
Yeah.
So when you take this off, take the burlap and you kind of tuck it in there and you loosen up the roots, and those roots will go right through the burlap.
And that's important because those roots are going to anchor that tree to the ground and help absorb all the water.
That's right. And you just kind of make sure it looks good. You tuck that burlap under there, it's fine. Tree is straight. Is the tree straight? It looks good. And then all we'll do is we'll put some dirt around it. In here, a little bit here, and before you know it, your tree is in the ground. And then I'll put some mulch, more mulch over top of it, like this. And there's ways to put the mulch in there. We'll use what we have.
And why do we put mulch on top? What does that do for us?
Well, several reasons. The mulch protects the tree from mowers or things like that because you build it up. Also, it looks nice.
It does
and then,
look nice.
but more importantly, it filters the water through really. So when you have a hard rain, the mulch kind of stops the rain and it filters the water through slowly.
Cool.
So that's what we'll do here. You make a little bowl around the tree so the little water can hit that. And that's it. And then sometimes if you have, these are called tree gaiters, and you wrap it around the tree like this, and you put water in it, and it seeps water into the tree very, very slowly.
Oh, okay.
And it holds about four gallons of water. So, and it'll take about 4 or 5 days to seep through. And I will do that when we're all done.
Fantastic.
Okay.
All right.
So once again, this is a coral maple tree. It grows about 20 feet tall, 20 feet wide, and very showy with the red bark, the shiny leaves. In the fall, they become a really, really vibrant yellow leaf, and it's very, very cool to look at in the fall.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Kelly.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. So now we have our 2021 arbor tree all planted and set for us. And I know we might have had a couple of questions out there. We did get some questions earlier. I think we answered most of them. I did have one question that was about how do trees get hollowed out?
That's right.
There's a couple different ways that can happen. One, animals can actually hollow them out depending on what you're talking about in regards to hollowing. Another thing is that the tubes that Mr. Kelly talked about inside of the tree, they're called xylem and phloem. They actually conduct the water. They pull it up like a straw all the way from the roots up to the leaves. And those tubes sometimes can get dried out if they don't get enough water. And if that happens, they become bitter and they fall apart. So then that also can make your tree become dry, dull, and hollow. So hopefully that answers your questions. Do we have any other questions? That's a fantastic question.
Great question.
Yeah.
Well, the longevity of the tree, especially those sequoia redwoods, that tree, that drive-through tree is, people say, well over 2,000 years old. So the bark of that tree, it's such a tough tree that they were able, and they will not do this again, but they were able to carve a, I think it was a 12-foot wide hole, I mean, you carved it through, and it didn't stun the tree at all, just because the tree was so massive and so thick and so tough that they were able to do that.
Yep. And you know, you can also determine the age of a tree and see how old it is. Not that we want to do this, but when you cut it and you look, there's rings inside of that trunk of the tree. The more rings, the wider the tree, the older the tree is. And those particular trees, some of them are almost as wide as a house. They're really, really wide. Yes. So they are quite old. And so that's why their trunks are so thick, and they have lots of tubes to get the water and conduct them. So that's how they cut the holes through those.
And those sequoia redwoods that we are mentioning, the drive-through tree and the tree that you see my kids standing in front of, they live in a perfect climate in Northern California where it doesn't get too cold, and there's a lot of rain, and they're well protected in the forest, so nothing really bothers them.
That's right. And also, you have to remember, for a tree to get big, it needs all of the nutrients it's supposed to get. It has to be able to make its own food. So in order to go through photosynthesis, it has to be able to collect the sunlight, to absorb the water, and make sure that it has plenty of carbon dioxide to absorb, so it can go through that process of photosynthesis and get the food that it needs. The other thing that it needs is space. They need space to grow. If you have a ton of trees in one small area, you're not going to have them being able to grow. And the ones that are the strongest and the best suited for the environment are going to be the ones that survive. I think for now we're going to have to wrap it up, but we want to thank you, friends, for coming and joining us. And we hope today that as you go home or you play outside for recess, take a look at all of the trees around you, because they are so important to us and we're important to them. So let's make sure that we respect them and take care of them. And we hope you have a great Arbor Day. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.